Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this evening's panel, Multiracial Coalition Building, Black and Brown community members leading the resistance together. My name is Lydia Walther-Rodriguez, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I am currently serving as a region director with CASA here in Baltimore, and all of us are here at the Baltimore Welcome Center, saying hi to you guys as we start this amazing panel. You will be hearing directly from impacted mothers and activists and movement organizers who have been in this fight together for decades and/or have just started in this movement work. We are here today with Ray Kelly, a seasoned organizer and Baltimore native and director of CPP, Citizens Policing Project. We are also here with Abraham Tema, CASA activist and community member and immigrant from Guatemala. We are also here with Donna Brown, founders of Making Changes, and also a mother of two, and native here to Baltimore City. We are also here with Darlene Kane, president and founder of Mothers on a Move. We're here with Yury, student activist and CASA youth member. And last but certainly not least, we are here with Trey Murphy, national organizer at the NAACP LDF and founder of Organizing Black. Welcome, and congratulations to all of you guys for continuing on this dialogue, not just today, but as we continue together doing this work. We're gonna transition to the panelists as they answer the very first question, because this movement is so personal to so many activists, movement organizers, and community alike. And we wanna start off with your journey. What inspired you to start this fight, to be part of the movement? What was your journey? And what keeps you inspired in this work? We're gonna first start with Darlene Kane with Mothers on a Move.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I started this movement as a mother and a grandmother. I lost my son, Dale Graham, in 2008 by the Baltimore City police officer. Dale was a father of two daughters, and he was a brother. And we all loved him as a family. In this very neighborhood, right up the street on Belnord, is where Dale was shot and killed. And I started this movement because I wanted other mothers and family members to stand up for their loved ones and to do what is right, which is to fight for new laws and legislations to have justice for their family members. Dale was going to school to become a law student, and he was robbed of that chance of his dream and the opportunities to pursue his career. His children will not be able to have their father present when they graduate from high school, college, or any kind of milestones that they will achieve as they grow older. So I'm here as a grandmother and a mother because joining with powerful people like this that I'm present with today has given me the strength, the courage, and ability to do this type of work with them collaboratively as a coalition. And I'm proud to be part of this coalition because they embraced me with their arms, welcomed me as soon as I met them all. We march together, we do legislations, we do lobby together, and it's so important of the work that we do on a local level and on a national level. I'm grateful to also have been part of the George Floyd March when he had passed away, to get that phone call and to travel state to state with mothers and families across the states. So I'm thankful to have the strength and courage to have these type of people that I can stand on, and I can have their shoulders, that whenever I'm strong or weak, that they're here for me. And today, as in a very important day, that I'm here as well. I'm glad to be among them again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Darlene, and thank you so much for sharing your story and continuing to inspire all of us to continue in this work every single day.
Thank you.
I want to turn it over now to Abraham Tema. What inspired you to be part of this movement, and what continues to motivate you to be part of this movement?
Thank you, Lydia. My name is Abraham Tema. I'm from Guatemala. I have been here of 16 years in Baltimore. My first year here in United States, I started working but after like 8 months, my worker, he stopped paying me. And I'm start really sad and looking to somebody who and asking who can help me. And somebody told me, CASA, they can help you. Oh, really? Yeah. So okay, with my other coworker, come on, we go find CASA. And we go find CASA, and the lawyer, he talked with us, and we explained to her what's happened. And she said, we call the guy, and we make an agreement with him, or we take him in the court. It make me really happy, okay. And after 2 weeks, the lawyer, she called us and she said, he will pay your money. Oh, great. And I'm in that moment, I start with CASA to be a member first. Now I'm a member of the leadership of CASA. Because it's not just to me that's what's happened. I know many of workers, they have that bad experience. So, and after that, I'm coming more and involvement to the all activity CASA have, and they teach me many things, how we can fight for our rights, how we can stay together. And in that time too, I can understand, and only we can fix many issues in our life, in our community life, just stay together, raise our voice, no matter what language we're talking, no matter what color we are. We share a same space, we are in a same city, and we fight for our better life.
Thank you so much, Abraham, for sharing your story and continuing to fight in this movement. I now want to turn it over to our friend and brother, Ray Kelly.
Thank you, Lydia. So what brought me into the movement and the work is I'm indigenous to a community called Sandtown, Winchester, which is actually the community where Freddie Gray was killed and where the epicenter of the riots and unrest that followed took place. I entered this movement specifically because of my own experience in those communities where there has been a historically redlined and oppressed community and has always been the focus of police engagement and consequently police abuse. So by the time I was 18 years old, I won't blame circumstance, but I was a convicted felon. I was also a parent, and that pretty much dictates the dynamic of a lot of people in our community. So as I got my own life and priorities in order, I gained the realization that this community is where people come to do bad. And it then became my goal as an agent of change to help people the same way I was helped to get out of that situation and be a productive member of our community. And what we know historically from these communities are most of them feel like they are not heard by their representatives and quite frankly have been disenfranchised from the processes. So my goal is to create that safe space for difficult conversations so that a community that historically doesn't trust the police or the system or the municipality to be engaged in processes that will directly impact their way of life.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ray. I'm going to turn it now over to you, Trey.
Sure. Thank you so much for this question, Lydia. I'm Trey Murphy. I serve as the Director of Community Organizing at the Legal Defense Fund, as well as a co-founder of Organizing Black. And my movement journey story is really rooted in two segments. The first is, just as Ray elevated so eloquently, is my personal experiences. It is no understatement that growing up in a city like Baltimore, you are being crushed underneath of the weight of white supremacy, of systems of oppression, oftentimes that doesn't take into account that there are other factors beyond just one's engagement inside of street life as to why they are actually inside of that life. And a lot of it rests around opportunities, or the lack thereof of opportunities, particularly for young Black people who grow up inside of poverty, so to speak. And so I joined movement out of this necessity to, one, wanting to stop hustling, wanted something different for myself, and wanted to make money in a way that would not land me in jail or, quite frankly, dead, right? Or in some other sort of extenuating circumstances that wouldn't be conducive for my long-term growth. And there was an organization called the Baltimore Algebra Project, who was willing to pay me, and so that was a plus. But what I did not realize was that it was so much more than just the payment, right? And so that was my personal experience, the first part of how I entered into movement. But the second was also the understanding and engagement that I got through just wanting to be paid. Right, and so I learned very quickly that there were systems that was in place, systems that was not ripe for me to be able to succeed, and that actually had a bunch of variables, as well as a bunch of ways in which it was intentionally trying to make sure that people who look like me and myself did not succeed. And that kept me into movement, right? Understanding the historical context of what it means to be Black in a city like Baltimore, in a country like the United States, that for so often has prioritized either one race or one identity over the many different identities that exist inside of this country and this democracy. And that became my foundation for my organizing journey. What has kept me inside of movement is understanding that there is a slither of hope for this failed experimentation that we call democracy, for this country that we call the United States, and for the city that we call Baltimore. And the slither of hope is that there is the willingness, and I would even venture to say the hunger, for folks to want something different, for folks to understand that our identities, where we are situated at, our socioeconomic status, does not define who we can be and the type of city, the type of country that we can exist in. And so that has kept me inside of movement, and then connecting that to the global Black diaspora of what it means to be Black inside of this world has been truly an eye-opening experience. And then I got inspired as well by many folks like you all who are on this panel, and to see folks who are so dedicated to the work, willing to risk it all on the whim and the chance that we can build something different, something better, something that is collectively ours. It's like has been the thing that has kept me inspired. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Trey. I'm going to turn it over now to my friend and colleague, Donna Brown. Donna, what brought you into this movement work? What personal journey and struggle, and what keeps you inspired to keep going?
My personal journey honestly starts with growing up hearing the stories from my grandparents about how the system of racism impacted their lives. My grandparents both lived through the Great Depression and what that meant, particularly for Black people in this country. But also, and being a parent, a child of an incarcerated parent, what that experience created for me. But in recognizing my father's own story, that his trajectory started as a teenager, the first time that he was incarcerated, that his entire experience in and out of that criminal justice system was always connected to his challenges with addiction, but he was never offered treatment, and consequently ended up dying as a result of his addiction. And what inspires me, motivates me in this work and maintaining my efforts in it is the recognition that when we're not active in it, what it creates for our communities, and that consequently our communities suffer overwhelmingly when we're not constantly in the pursuit of justice. And so we have to be able to maintain that work. We don't stop at a win, we don't settle at a victory. It is a continuous process of engagement and maintaining the fight for justice and making sure that we have justice and equality, and that our young people have the right to their own pursuits.
Thank you so much, Donna, for your story and your reflection. And I'm going to turn it over to our very last panelist, Yury. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to join the movement and what keeps you engaged?
Thank you, Lydia. My name is Yuri Guardado, and I've been living in the US for 4 years. I'm 16 years old. And the reason why I came into the movement, I come from a place where racism, discrimination, social status stigma, and apprehension isn't really a thing. And my eyes were abruptly open to all of these injustices and society's lack of humanity at the age of 12. And that's right there, that's when I knew that something had to be done. I realized that when you're a person of color and your voices are not being heard, and especially when you're an immigrant. So when people ask me what the reason why I'm still in the movement and why I joined the movement is to take off the stigma of being something else that's not white, something else that's not seen as powerful, and embrace and empower every single person, no matter their race, ethnicity, age, especially your youth. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Yuri. And thank you all of you guys for sharing, your reflection, but also what brought you into the movement. And we know as activists, movement organizers, community leaders, that this fight is never ending. Where there's a victory, there's another fight to start. And there's something that we say in Spanish, right? La lucha sigue, sigue, sigue. The fight continues on and on and on. And this could be a tireless journey. It could be a struggle. And so as activists and movement organizers, we choose where we struggle every day. And many of us have known each other for 10 plus years, and we're continuing on in this fight. And so I'd like to open up the second question with, what organization, are you in the struggle with right now that many of us call or organizing home, that inspires us each and every day, not just individually to keep going, but we're invested in recruiting and developing the leadership of the next activists to come that are gonna replace us and keep this movement going. So I'm gonna turn it over first to Ray to talk to us about his organizing home in CPP.
Thank you, Lydia. So the Citizens Policing Project, we say that we address equity through a lens of faith, equity, and intentional listening. So as I said earlier, our communities historically have been oppressed and don't feel that their voice can be leveraged in a way to influence actual change. So that's where CPP focuses our energy. Our goal is to ensure that the impacted community, not just the engaged community, but those that are impacted, that don't like to talk to the police, that don't like to be involved in civic processes because of our history, still have a voice. Because in a paradigm of police accountability and police misconduct, all of those incidents and actions happen in a community that has been conditioned to let it go and to live with it. So what we try to do is create safe space for people to tell their stories. We are firm believers that the solution is not in the data, but rather in the stories of those that have been impacted, traumatized, and oppressed by the current structure of our system. And it is their ideas, their solutions, and their intentional engagement in the process that will actually help the city as a whole realize those changes. So we focus mainly on elevating the voice of the unheard and structuring the next generation of advocates through our youth program to ensure that this fight goes on. We call it the long game because we know we're undoing 400 years of racist oppression, and we can't solve that problem in one day. We don't have the magic potion or silver bullet, so we have to make sure we're conditioning for a generational fight that can encourage our next generations to persevere.
Thank you so much, Ray, and thank you so much for introducing us to the Citizens Policing Project. I want to turn it over now to Ms. Darlene Kane as she walks us through her organizing home and what she's created in the space of Mothers on the Move.
Thank you again, Lydia. Ray had said some of the things that I was focusing on as well, which is impacted families, especially the mothers, fathers, and the siblings. Going into communities where many people don't want to go into, being boots to the ground in the community, coming places, talking to people, letting them know that they're not even forgotten, that their stories matter, their children, their loved ones matter, and that the community matters, where they live and where we stay. So to let them know that we have to continue to stand up, we have to continue to fight back and speak for the unheard voices, because they're not here to fight for themselves. So we have to be the ones to fight for them. And we have to be the ones to keep going to different communities, block after block, street after street, meeting individuals, talking to individuals, and getting, like Ray said, their stories, talking to them, engaging. We're to continue to engage with them, with other people who are not engaging with them. We're the ones who are engaging. We're the ones who are communicating, educating, giving out the resources, and speaking to them to let them know that we care. We're here for them. We have been impacted also. There's the news, there's the media, friends, their neighbors, there are people we know who have died through police brutality and continue to die of police brutality. So we have to let them know that we have to continue this fight and don't stop, because like Trey said, you know, it's been so many years that we're still fighting. We're going to keep going, but we want them to know that there is hope at the end of the rainbow, and that, you know, in their darkness there will be some light, and we have to truly believe and hold on to that. And with each other, this team that I'm with, and right now it's more of us that's not here today, and people who are just like-minded and out here that's fighting these legislations and creating new legislations. We have to continue this, continue going into these neighborhoods, continue. We used to go door knocking, talking to people face to face, letting individuals know, holding mothers' hands, being there to comfort people, to really let them know that we're here and we really care and we respect them. We respect the stories of the individuals as well. And just showing the fact that there is love. There's love in our communities. And together we can create this peace together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Darlene, and for bringing bringing together the space that you've created of Mothers on the Move for all mothers and families who have lost loved ones by the hands of police, and continuing to be our North Star as we continue to do this work and bringing in directly impacted voices. I want to turn it now over to Abraham and Yury. Abraham, you mentioned your journey into the movement, and you talked about CASA. Can you tell us about your movement home in CASA? What is CASA? And Yury, can you tell us about the special space you've created in CASA, known as a youth committee? Abraham.
Thanks again, Lydia. My home organization is CASA, and I'm a leadership in this organization. I have been with CASA like 12 years, and I learned many things with the rest of our people in the organization. How we can fight our rights, how we can change our life, not just the Hispanic community. Like what I say before, we in Baltimore City, we have many communities with different cultures. So we need to learn how we can share and live together. And we need to learn how we can fight together. Not just, oh, it's not my problem because I'm not the black community or Hispanic community or white community. No, we are, we need to understand we are a family here in Baltimore. The family, they work together, they fight together to get a better life. So I'm excited, and I'm still, and I stay, fight for my community, for my city, in CASA. Because CASA, they give me the opportunity to how we can fight.
Thank you so much, Abraham. And there's a special place in CASA for youth called the Youth Committee, Yury. Can you tell us a little bit about the Youth Committee at CASA?
Real quick before I answer your question, I just want to emphasize the why this youth committee was created. And it's because our younger generation now, and teenagers and young adults, nowadays we're being seen as less, we're seen as fragile, we're seen as worthless, and that we're just of no good use in the world. And I just think that has to change. And CASA Youth Committee is a place to unite and bring together the youth to fight all those fears that are implemented, especially when you're an immigrant. When you come to the US, there is this feeling that's being passed that you have to stay on the low because you're less, because you're not documented, plus if you're a person of color, plus if you're not documented. So I just think that I just had in mind when thinking about the youth committee that I want to take that away, want to rip off that bandage, and I want to shape the world's leaders, the future world leaders, to make a change, to take off all of the stigma, all of those feelings of feeling low and less just because you're younger, and make adults, make leaders, older leaders, hear our voices and understand that we're powerful, understand that we're great, and understand that we are here and we are the future.
Thank you so much, Yury. Thank you so much, Abraham. I'm going to turn it over now to Trey. Trey, I know you wear two hats on the grassroots and the national level. Can you tell us about your organizing homes and how they've impacted you?
Of course. And so fitting to follow the powerful personal experiences that so many of these great organizations have helped to shape. For me, Organizing Black, we have a particular saying that we ascribe to, that we're practitioners in a world that does not yet exist. And that's so fitting for what we believe that we're up to. We were born out of the Baltimore uprising, out of a need, or I should say a gap that we felt like needed to be filled, one that would allow young Black people, particularly ages 18 to 35, to have a space where they could deeply wrestle with the many complexities of what it means to be Black inside of this country, what it means to be young inside of this country, what it means to hold progressive ideologies that are far more advanced than where this country currently is, and what it means to fight and push back against structural racism, white supremacy, and the constant attack, anti-Black attacks that we felt every day. And so we created that space to talk about everything from principle struggle to abolition. We are an abolitionist organization, to what it means to also train up a new generation of civil rights workers, of movement workers, somewhere to the tune of 300. Black movement workers is what we set out, bold and ambitious. But we also wanted to create the type of container where folks could co-create the work together, where they could like wrestle with each other, where we could sharpen one another, where it wasn't punitive, where it wasn't what the system teaches us every day, which is that you can't push back, right? You could have a space where you could push back, where you could wrestle, where you could grow and learn together. And we have a saying that we're student teachers. Just as much as we're imparting information and teaching, we're also learning as a continuous mechanism. So so that's Organizing Black, what we try to create, and we've done a lot of great things in partnership with all of these amazing organizations on this panel. But then there's also LDF, which Legal Defense Fund, which I'm fairly new to, only a couple years into. But to me, one of the most prominent things about the particular position that I hold and where the institution is at is that they fundamentally believe that Black political power is a particular thing that we must fight for and advance, and that it's not in a vacuum. Black political power has to come in the form of also recognizing that we're building a multiracial democracy that recognizes the many identities, the humanities of all people. And of course, naturally, our particular role inside of that is focusing on Black people, nationwide across the country. But we believe in global solidarity. We believe in cross-movement solidarity inside of this country. We believe that our collective liberations is directly intertwined, and that Black people will not be able to get free unless we also are in solidarity and coalition spaces with people who are also crushed underneath of the weight of white supremacy and systemic oppression. And so I'm excited every day to go to work to think about how we can leverage national resources as well as local resources to achieve our collective goal, which is building a country and a democracy where it doesn't matter your quote unquote legal status, it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your gender, it doesn't matter your sexual orientation, it doesn't matter if you're differently able or not. We are all collectively able to experience what it means to be a human inside of this country, what it means to have our humanity that is sacred and our dignity that is also shared.
Thank you so much, Trey. And I'm going to turn it over again here to Ms. Donna, who's the founder of Making Changes and also part of CPP.
Yeah. Thanks for that transparency, right? Because my motivation in this work was born out of my personal experiences in life, all the things that touched my life, to include health disparities. I worked with an organization, a ministerial group, that confronted the NIH around the lack of research and investment in diseases and disorders that affect people of color, and especially indigenous folks in this country, that they were not even on their scale of research. That I worked with, after working with other organizations, recognizing that you work with organizations that are supposed to be doing good for people in the community, but the people that they're supposed to be doing good for aren't ever getting that benefit. And so taking that momentum and going out and really doing that work and engaging and being active in community and in the interests of people that are underserved. The work began working with incarcerated youth and recognizing all of the challenges there, and that the kids that were in the detention center raised the question that they're the only ones that they see in there. That there were other white kids that had committed the same crimes that they did. Nonviolent crimes, but why were they in there? And why were they the only ones there and not those other kids? And so raising activism around youth charged as adults, began working with incarcerated men and women and help assisting them in as they matriculated out of the incarceration system, helping them to connect with services and supports to help foster, the life that they deserved and that they desired. Doing the work and recognizing, that yes, after in awareness of my own father's experience, that Black people are not given the opportunities and access to treatment, and that we have suffered overwhelmingly in our communities. But there's an extreme disparity in the access to drug rehabilitation and treatment. All of the things that have impacted my life, I've taken my life and invested in those spaces to help affect change. And that's why it's called Making Changes. But I, in my work, aligned with my partner in faith, because we had the same commitment, not just in advocacy, but in faith and understanding the value of service, right? And in our belief, out of our faith, our commitment to service to our communities. So while we do activism and organizing around police reform, the primary thing that we focus on is bringing services and supports to our communities, recognizing the disparities and all of the challenges that our communities suffer with, that we're there to help bring those services to our community and support the space that we live in, and believe in service to them.
Thank you so much, Donna, for sharing. And, something really impactful happened to us all collectively in our city in 2015. Many of us have been calling the organizations you guys have already described as your organizing home, as your fuel to continue fighting into the movement. And we crossed paths in this movement before 2015 on the state level as we fought for legislation that was affecting all of us. But in 2015, we all lived through the Baltimore uprising. That was a direct result to our frustration and our no más point, no more, after the murder of Freddie Gray in the hands of Baltimore City Police Department. And all of us had been doing so much work together on the state level, and in 2015, we formed a coalition. Our state level network transitioned into a coalition on the grassroots. And we knew we had to do so much more work right here in our city before taking it back to the state level. And we together collectively founded the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, CGSJ, to continue to fight those systemic oppressions that were happening here in our municipality, but were the root cause of things happening on the state level and throughout this country. And so bringing together all of our organization, organizing homes, and not just all of our organizing homes, but we've been together since 2015, and we were over 30 strong organizations that continue to fight on together, not just here in Baltimore City, but throughout the state of Maryland. I want to turn it over to the panelists because, to say we're a coalition that has been together nearly 10 years, that's a long time. And to be founded during a time of uprising in Baltimore was also a challenging time, but something we knew we had to do. So I want to turn it back over to Donna to talk a little bit about the very beginning, how we came together, and what were some of the foundational things, that foundation we actually had to build, easing a lot of those racial tensions, easing a lot of those stigmas as we continued fighting on together in a more intentional grassroots way.
So I always go back to the founding story, right? Because I really thought that it was the brilliance of two dynamic leaders who were both engaging in significant work in this city. Gustavo Torres from CASA and Jamal Bryant, who's the former pastor of Empowerment Temple, under which I served in ministry at the time. And the two of them thought it necessary to bring the strength of our communities together to fight for justice in the space that we were both being attacked in the city through our system of policing, and recognizing that there was more power in us coming together than us fighting, in our separate spaces. And so bringing together the CJSJ, we started off doing anti-racism trainings and anti-bias trainings for the sake of being able to decrease some of the tensions and merging two communities together that really had not had any history and working together, even though we were suffering in the same space. We did significant work throughout the years and working together, and we still do that work together and bridging the gaps between our communities through the Crossing Borders program, where we have community conversations, where we bring our community members together, and in that space we get to recognize, the power of a voice and being able to recognize how much commonality that we have and being able to work through our differences at the same time to help strengthen and build our communities.
Thank you so much, Donna. And that work was happening almost in parallel to our work as we pushed back against the national narrative and also the world narrative, as all eyes were looking at Baltimore during this time. And Ray, can you tell us a little bit about those early victories? And then I'm going to turn it to Trey to talk about continuous victories we've had with CGSJ, especially as our true mission as a coalition is to uplift community voices and uplift community engagement in any type of policy change, legislative change, to ensure that we are being represented as a community, that directly impacted voices are being represented when there are any discussions about change. And we are a little bit slim on time, so I'll turn it over to you, Ray, for 2 minutes, and then I'll turn it over to you, Trey, for 1 minute.
Okay, so I'll be quick about it. Like I said earlier, we come from a community that's been historically redlined, oppressed, and consequently disenfranchised. So following the murder of Freddie Gray and the initiation of the DOJ's investigation, it was important for us to make sure that there was a safe and trusted conduit for our community members to tell their truth about police engagement in Sandtown, Winchester. So I was then the executive director of the No Boundaries Coalition, and in partnership with CASA and the other member groups of the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, we created what we called the West Baltimore Community Commission on Police Misconduct, where our focus was to elevate those unheard voices. So through that process, we were able to be an informal conduit for thousands of residents to give their stories discreetly, anonymously, if necessarily, to the Department of Justice. And essentially, CASA, No Boundaries, and quite a few other organizations conducted what we called the People's Decree Summit. So we had over 100 residents, we had about 13 organizations, and we had about a dozen representatives from the Department of Justice taking notes, recording, and reporting back to the people. And in that gathering, we created what we called the People's Decree of Central West Baltimore, which outlined the demands that the residents had on how they should be treated by the police department that is paid and sworn to serve them. And of that 16 recommendations that we formalized with the DOJ that day, 12 of those recommendations made it into the consent decree, which mandates reforms to the Baltimore police verbatim. So that was a major victory, and also the catalyst for not only the national recognition of the work that we do here in Baltimore, but also the plight of communities that have been historically oppressed and their abilities to kind of elevate their voice and actually influence change. And that momentum gained from that has led us to many victories in the past. We have essentially, through our structure and workshop at the Campaign for Justice, Safety, and Jobs, changed the way that this city pursues policy changes, procedural changes, not just with police accountability, but now through all city agency services. So we demanded that any changes made to police policy require a certain amount of time for community input and feedback, and we wanted to make sure that that process becomes an essential component of all changes towards equity in Baltimore City. So that, once again, was a huge victory. We are also able to use that process of accountability and transparency to completely change the way police commissioners are selected and appointed in Baltimore City. So we continue to leverage and elevate those voices to ensure that any new processes or procedures are inclusive of every demographic in Baltimore City.
And thank you so much for bringing up the impact that we've had even on the police commissioner process. I know all of us on this table were pushing and demanding to the point where the nominee the mayor had to remove his nomination after we investigated him in different states and collectively used our power to shut down that process that was not transparent and demand one that was transparent. And us reaching that transparent process gave us 9 different community meetings where all community members were able to question and ask questions of the next police commissioner before he was nominated. So that was, a huge impact. I want to turn it over to Trey really quickly to walk us through one of the big state legislative pushes that we had recently with the LEOBR. And then I'm going to finalize our panel discussion today with Yury and Miss Darlene.
Perfect. So I'll be extremely quick. One, just following off of what Ray said on the police commissioner, please. Arguably we are the reason why this current police commissioner is in place. Even if it's in an informal and indirect way, we were the reason why the previous nominee had to rescind, just as Lydia said. But also, just as you said before, the police commissioner could be confirmed, there had to be substantive buy-in from the residents and community members of the city of Baltimore, which was a major historic victory. But then that also feeds into some of the other victories that we got. That was truly a moment where we had flex power. We had built power and we had flex power. And that led directly into the 2020 uprising that was spread in the wake of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others that came before them and subsequently after them, which led us to be able to leverage the power that we had built on a state level to receive a win from a demand that we had elevated years ago, probably even before the death of Freddie Gray, which was that we lived inside of a state where police officers were treated as above everyone else. You know, they were sort of like a premier citizen that could, or community member that could not be held accountable for their actions. And so we had demanded that the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights, which had gave them additional powers far beyond what any resident would ever receive, gave them additional power to evade accountability, to evade transparency. We demanded that that be repealed. And in 2020, this group collectively, along with partners all across the state, but started, I would argue, to say, with a number of activists and organizers and advocates in Baltimore City, led by those same folks, was able to build this broad coalition and demand that Leah Board be repealed. And we received that in 2020, which has just gone into effect this year in 2022. But that was major, and it was as a result of the power that we built. And then the last thing that I'll say really quickly is that we actually didn't stop there, right? Just like we didn't stop when we got the consent decree and many of the codifying demands inside of that. We didn't stop at Leopold. We also said that there were other pieces of the system that enabled state actors such as the police to be able to systemically oppress our communities, one of which was reforming the Maryland Public Information Act to make sure that they did not hide information from our communities, that we got the data of how they were brutalizing us, who was complaining, all of those things, and that data would be able to be released, because the previous act said that it could not be released at all. Now we actually have a chance to get some of that data. The other is use of force. We know that police officers, their first automatic response is to escalate things, right? And inside of our society, inside of our world, that is detrimental to Black and brown communities. In fact, it will cost us our lives. And so we said that there had to be some standards to be able to hold them accountable. And then a final piece that I'll talk about is local control. We live inside of a city right now where our police department is controlled and regulated at the state level in terms of its policy, and that there are people in positions of power from other counties that is not the city of Baltimore, who have substantial power and influence of our police department and are able to make decisions where they will never have to live with the consequences of their decisions. And to us, that is dangerous. It sets a dangerous precedent from the foundation of this country when we talk about taxation without representation, right? And for us, we are saying that that wrong has to be right. And so we want a task force to study the issue and eventually get it on the ballot in front of voters so that they can say what type of local control that they want that is actually regulated at the local level where the funding for it comes from.
Thank you so much, Trey. And, you know, from that huge victory in HB 670 that we won in 2021, we continue to fight to ensure that we don't lose through implementation, because that victory is something that we got on paper that now is being implemented as of July 1st, 2020, and we're still fighting for that implementation, and the fight is going to continue. You know, this coalition has worked very hard in Baltimore, and 3 of our coalition members are actually part of that advisory board to bring back local control to our city. And we're gonna continue to fight from within and outside as we continue fighting for reform. I do wanna turn it over to Abraham to tell us a little bit about his story in working with the CJSJ coalition as a CASA member.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. Couple years ago, I have an incident in my home, and I had to call the police. When the police they coming to my house, one of them, she asking if I'm a resident legal here in Maryland, and I say yes, but she said, "Are you legal, or if not, that is cost you your deportation?" So I know what's happened here in Baltimore City. The mayor, she delivered a order to like the police. They don't have right to asking the people them status. But she did, and I tell her, do you know what the mayor she delivered with that order? You can't ask him that, and she don't answer nothing. In that moment, I understand how police abuse them power with everybody, everywhere, all the time. So when I hear about the coalition of the police reform here in Baltimore, and I say I will be part of that coalition, definitely, because how many people they have these issues with the police, and then many other things. So we need to stay up of the police reform here in Baltimore, because we know how they're working. They have a lot of money to spend, but I don't know where and how, but not to save our community, not to save ourselves. So we need to change that.
Thank you so much, Abraham, and for the collective power that we brought together to escalate that executive order by the mayor into the very first police policy to ensure that police could not collaborate with ICE on the municipality level. We did that here in 2019, and we were the first municipality to do that. And many other jurisdictions in Maryland started to build those municipality trust acts, thanks to our collective work here. They brought it to Montgomery County, and we are still fighting that on the state level to ensure the state of Maryland becomes a sanctuary city. And I want to lead us to our final question for the panelists, and I'll turn it over to Darlene. If there's any reflections or questions or things that you want to make sure for anybody who is listening at home, things that they remember, not just about this panel, but the fight collectively that must continue on. Ms. Darlene, do you want to share some final words?
Yes, first of all, thank you for this question. I like to direct this to our city, Baltimore, and our surrounding cities and states to stay encouraged, to continue to speak out for your loved ones, be that voice, because as police brutality continues, we need to continue to stand up. We need to continue to fight back. And together, collectively, as organizations and groups and family members and community leaders and faithfully, we together are stronger together in numbers. And because of that, we are going to become the change. We will make changes in this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Darlene. And thank you so much for the viewers at home watching. And we encourage you, as Ms. Darlene said, to continue to be that change and fight forward. Have a good night, everybody.